Yes, my name is Ram Subramaniam. I'm the Vice President for Instruction at De-Anza College, and I'm the moderator for this panel this afternoon. Just a little setup for our panel. As we know, cybersecurity is one of the fastest growing fields in our economy today, but it's also one that is most challenged in the workforce. We just don't seem to have enough qualified members within the workforce in cybersecurity, yet we have lots of threats that are constantly growing in scale and sophistication, more importantly. So we, at least I'm kind of somewhat biased, think of ourselves in the community colleges as playing a pivotal role in generating this talent pipeline for the future of cybersecurity ecosystem. So we hope we are providing affordable and accessible education, and we hope to build pathways that connect our students to meaningful careers. But our success depends on strong partnerships between the industry, the government, and other statewide initiatives. And so we're here to learn from our panel about how we bridge those gaps between the industry and also the higher education system. So please join me in welcoming our panelists. We have 5 of them here today: David Doyle, Ron Shaw, Shawan Hall, Aaron Worthman, and Blake Williams. And I'm going to have them introduce themselves to you. So we'll start with David first.
Hi, can you hear me? Good morning, everyone. Oh, afternoon, I guess. Sorry. My name is David. I am former CISO, currently providing fractional CISO services. Been in the cyberspace for about 30 years or so, in a lot of different capacities. Pretty much every industry except pharmaceutical, although I like to try and get credit my partners on the animal pharmaceutical side. So, yeah, it's been a really interesting, I think, growth of security, and in a former life, I actually worked for a community college workforce development program, providing services to both DoD as well as some of our friends at the school level. So a lot of experience over the years. Currently also providing some mentorship for an undergrad capstone program, as well as a grad program for KSU in Georgia.
Hi, my name is Ron Shaw, and so I have been working in the industry before start teaching back in 2011. So before that, I was working at the industry in various high-tech companies, and as a CIO of startup, medium-sized, and large-sized companies. And so once I started teaching at Only, and I also helped develop various information technology curriculums. And in 2019, I also led Only College program to be designated by NSA as the National Center of Academic Excellence in Cybersecurity Education. So the key sense is more of how can we continue to work with the industry, with our peers, and so get them involved in the overall cybersecurity education.
Thank you, Ron.
Oh, looks like my mic's on. I'm the one with a dedicated mic, so take that, you guys. Aaron Worthman, about 25 years of IT and security experience, primarily at startups. Each one of those startups tends to get acquired by a much larger company. Companies of note would be Newstar, Adobe, small company called Adobe, etc. I've also worked in retail at Albertsons, where I was the head of digital security. Digital security at Albertsons looks something like all the data that's collected on shoppers, all the web app, the mobile app, all of those sort of things. We saw that as a $10 billion asset, so my job was to secure all of those. These days, I work with startups and medium-sized companies at securing their companies, their infrastructure, as a advisory CISO at 909 Cyber. I am also on the board of the CIO Scholarship Fund with my partner here, Ron, and I'm on the board of the ISSA, which is a organization whose purpose is to educate students and anyone who's interested in cybersecurity.
All right, my name is Sean Hull. I'm the Executive Director of Infrastructure and Information Security at College of the Canyons. In addition to that, I'm also the CISO for the CCC Security Center, which is actually a grant-funded program from the Chancellor's office where we are providing insight and services to secure all the community colleges in California. I've been in the system specifically for 27 years. I've taught in CTE programs, including A+ certification, and actually at the high school level, I built the local high school's animal science program. You can ask me about that later. So I've been, I think I've touched or taught or worked in pretty much every area of IT within the community college system, and so this place really, I live, eat, sleep, breathe community colleges. So happy to be here.
Welcome, panelists. So as you see, we have 2 members from the community colleges and 2 industry partners. And I had a set of questions which they've already seen before, but I'm going to go from the middle of my set of questions that I have here, which is, it's not lost on me that the panel and myself, all included, identify as males. So I want to know, how can we ensure that underrepresented students, including women and students of color, see cybersecurity as a viable career path, that they have access to training opportunities? Do you want to speak to that, any of you?
Well, I have a dedicated mic, so I'll go first. Yeah, so first I'd say I'm a person, I am someone who identifies as a person of color, despite my Anglo last name. Don't let that fool you. But more specifically on women in cyber, I think first it comes with awareness. You pointed it out, but I think next after awareness is acknowledgement. We don't do that enough, and we don't give enough opportunity. On one of the boards that I'm on, we had to actively seek a woman for that board. That was intentional, it was purposeful. And that tends to happen more and more. I'm glad it happens, but I think it starts with awareness and it starts with acknowledging.
Go ahead.
Yeah, so I agree with Aaron. I think awareness early on is very important. And so one of the things we have done is we have invited a woman as a guest speakers, or people with color as a guest speakers. And then we also involved with Girls Can Code Club as well. And we actively sometimes go to the high school to really to show that especially if you bring a woman or a person with color, so they can see themselves, yeah, I can do that as well.
I think, step one for me starts with providing opportunities. I think the big piece of, and I think we'll get to this later in cyber, there's a lot of gatekeeping and a lot of elitism within this field. And because of that, I think that tends to shy folks away. I think the last 2 years, I'm going on 2 years, I put together programs for internships. When we focus on soliciting those interns, my goal is always even numbers. Right? So I will always, and I tell my female interns this all the time, is I take 2 females, 2 males, and every single time it's easier to find my females. For some reason, their resumes are better, their experience aligns to what I've asked, all of those things. But generally, they're not given those opportunities because, for whatever reason, whether the opportunity was never presented to them or that they've never taken advantage of it, by creating, I think, spaces where students know that they have an opportunity to come in, whether they are female, male, of color, that's really step one. Providing support to organizations that actually focus on providing those opportunities, also especially inward reaching. We have multiple programs within our community college systems that focus on our dreamers, our students of color, making sure that as a person in the field that's providing those opportunities, making sure I'm at those meetings, talking to those people, letting them know that hey, I'm here. I know I'm limited, I can only do so much, but at least if nothing else, know that there's an opportunity there. And I think that's really the hard part, is making sure that people in the field are stepping into those spaces where we're not, and then providing those opportunities.
Thank you.
Yeah, just to add, I think too, it's creating the culture within the organization, right? Or amplifying the culture that already exists in the organization. A lot of times that part tends to get missed. And so you're not building that groundswell within the organization, but we're supporting that, making that an important factor and component. Then I think that it really adds some unnecessary obstacles and in some ways dissuades people from wanting to kind of be a continued part of that. But then I would also add, getting out and working with the community groups that are trying to implement that, use that as a force multiplier.
Thank you. Yeah, I heard gatekeeping and elitism from pretty much all of you, and I think that is something that we all need to be actively paying attention to. So going back to the top of my questions here, so we often hear about the cybersecurity talent shortage, and from your perspective, where are the biggest gaps right now, and how are colleges and industry working together to address these gaps?
Well, with all the emerging technologies and so the skill set of our workforce ever changing, so the gap is evident, getting bigger and bigger because our the educational institution some of that has now been kept it up. And also, even in the general populations, especially in the school, some of the students has not even been taught or about cybersecurity until they go to college, or some of them even after the college as well. So one of the key things is more of how can you make the awareness and also people view this is a career or an area they should get into. Especially right now, as we all know, cybersecurity is just not only IT type things. It affects every industry, right? Whether you're business, healthcare, all different kind of things. So at Oloni, and I also try to work with a different department, so they're asking to add some topics, on SOX, right, or HIPAA in a different department, and also some of the fundamental cybersecurity skill set. So one of the challenges, I believe, even for the student, sometimes it's hard, even though they say there's tons of job out there. Well, yes, there is, but it's very hard for community college students because they don't have the job-related experience. And the company a lot of time want to have people with some kind of experience, right? So that is also a challenge. And how can we get around that? How can we help our students so that they can get a little head start? And so that's the reason, for myself and Aaron, we know each other for a long time. We're working with industry professionals, and so that we provide the opportunity for students for internship, mentoring, as some of my colleagues were saying. So I think that those things all added up together.
Yeah, so what I see a lot of are folks that have solid skill sets that don't know how to apply those skill sets or where to apply those skill sets at. It's one of the reasons why I'm so big into community, and I'm a part of 3 or 4 different communities. What I'd like to see are more students applying themselves to more communities, because that's where the jobs are at, right? We're far removed from the time when you could just apply to a job and you would get an interview. Those days are gone. Every job that anybody applies to, myself, anybody on this panel, any of you apply to, there are going to be 300, 400, 1,000 other applicants to that job. Even if you take your resume, run it through AI, and you match it to the job description perfectly, there are still 1,000 other applicants for that job. So how do you set yourself apart from that? You need to network. You need to know maybe the hiring manager, or maybe somebody at the job. You need a reference. You need all of those things. And so what I'd like to see students do more is get out there and network. How can you all help? You can build communities at your colleges. You can encourage folks to go to other communities, go to other events, or what have you.
Yeah, I would absolutely agree with both comments. I think too, there's an opportunity to start to create some business awareness and some context in kind of that student mindset, right? So what do I mean, right? At the end of the day, we're trying to secure data, systems, network, et cetera, but why, right? Who are the teams, who are the stakeholders, why does it matter? And I still see that that's not always getting addressed, and so technology is great, it's important, and having the functional skill set in that is important, but a lot of times what I see in the workplace is the inability to relay that context to the stakeholder, or to understand who the stakeholders are, and to try and find ways to help create that balance of enablement as well as control, which is, a lot of times we focus on more the control side and security, and it creates it creates a divide, and so I think that's one area that we can really focus on. I like to see a little bit more too on the OT, ICS, or industrial control system side too into a curriculum, because I think a lot of times we focused on more the IT side of things, and you look at like critical infrastructure, risks to critical infrastructure, investments. We've come a long way. Companies have started developing products and services to help secure that space, but it still has a long way to go when compared to the IT side of it. So being able to kind of bolster curriculum or create curriculum around those areas, I think will help create better rounded students, and you'll have the amplifiers of networking and all the other skills that they're getting in the curriculum.
I'm very glad you talked about OT. Absolutely lacking. So last week I was at this FBI Academy talk, where I led a breakout discussion, and there was an OT person who, I guess I won't say what agency, approached me, and they said there's nobody here from OT. There's nobody applying to any of my positions. There's nobody in this industry that I can hire. So OT is an untapped industry that is unsecure.
What is OT?
Operational technology. I was just going to mention something. What's interesting about our space too, again, it's an unintentional process, but we speak in code, right? And so that's unfortunately, that's part of how we gatekeep too. It's unintentional, I apologize. I don't mean to say it that way, but it's part of when you're having those conversations in a room and people are just like, wow, you're all a part of the dark magic, and you know how to do the things. And I think that's the toughest part, is step one, understanding, put it on the table, cybersecurity is not an entry-level position. Step two, nobody wants to hire an entry-level person. Like the joke in the space right now as a cybersecurity person is you see, again, alphabet soup, a CISSP for a position that pays about 60 grand a year. What that relates to in education is a PhD for a $60,000 a year job, right? So years of experience, but that's where it gets tough. Is those are the barriers that a lot of people that are in the hiring space create for us. And so by creating those barriers at the hiring level, not truly understanding it, because we're trying to get into these spaces, a lot of the security folks are trying to get into spaces, and the people that are hiring us don't understand what it is that we do, because again, it's dark magic. And somebody within the space, a consultant or someone built that requirement for those roles, and that's where it starts to get tough. So making sure that students understand where the pathway is through cybersecurity, or through to cybersecurity as the end goal, I think really needs to be a part of the conversation. And so that's, from resume building to networking, that's huge. Because it is such a close-knit community that if you know someone, you know someone, you know someone. And having the ability to make sure that we're focusing and getting our students to understand that it's not just about getting a degree or getting a check mark next to your name. It's about making absolutely sure that as you're given opportunities, you take them, you network, you put yourself out there. A friend of mine who works at Netflix made a joke of like, oh, she was talking to my cybersecurity students. She says, don't you guys go to meetups? And I'm like, no, we're IT nerds. We stay home, but that's what's missing, is a lack of getting out there and making sure that it's not just a name or a degree or a resume. It's a face and a person.
Yeah, he knows I'm going to say this, but in order to obtain a CISSP, you have to have 3 years of experience. So how does that even belong on an entry-level position? right? So yeah, you knew what I was going to say. So it's so frustrating to me when I see that on anything, right? It's just want to like throw it to this table. Like he knows my frustration with that. Right? That's just a poorly written job description, and you know.
So I have a related question. So most of us in the community college spaces, at least my former college at Foothill College and De-Anza, where I'm at right now, we offer cybersecurity programs which are maybe 4 or 5 classes which lead to a certificate of completion in cybersecurity. But clearly what I'm hearing from you is one needs much more than that in order to be able to get into a job. So that I see already as one major barrier. And the other one that I've heard also you talk about is you have to know someone who knows someone who knows someone. Our students don't know anybody. They're all first-time college goers for the most part, and it is already a huge barrier for them to come to college. But beyond that, and to have actual networking connections is already a huge challenge. So how are we going to reconcile these two sort of big issues that we have here?
So that's a good follow-up. So as I mentioned earlier, my colleague also mentioned, cybersecurity as an entry job is very hard. Because if I'm a manager, I have a company, I don't want to hire somebody who's new and as a cybersecurity specialist. However, I have a student ask me, how do I even get into the field? And does the certification really helps? Of course it helps. Because without a job related experience, certification is only one. The hiring manager will say, well, you probably know something, right? But another key thing is, as I tell the student who asked me, I said, well, if you really want to get into cybersecurity, if you cannot get that job, don't worry. That is not really the one you want to get right away, because you should, I always tell them, go apply for help desk. Help desk in any company. Many companies have help desk job. And help desk, from there, if you prove yourself, it can be easily migrated to a higher position. Help desk requires you have a skill set in basic knowledge that cybersecurity requires, whether it's operating system, programming, networking, everything, right? So another thing, that people mentioned about the student. You mentioned, well, a student doesn't know anybody, which is true. They know somebody. They're professors, or as they said, maybe you should go out. And so Aaron and I are involved in a number of organizations. Sometimes we have event, we need volunteers. I always encourage our students, you have to go to the volunteers, because one of the event we have a CIO scholarship fund, we have an annual golf event, and we have about 100 senior IT, the CIO, the CISO over there at the golf course. And in the past many years, some of students actually got internship right there, and then got a job offer, because then it become personal, right? As I use the word industry. Sometimes some of the job is not advertised; it's there, and I write up job description afterwards. Well, that's just a fact of life.
I think there's another question. Sorry, I think there's another question that I'll come back to this on. But what I want to also mention here, I mentioned some other techniques. But another technique is just to reach out to folks from industry and have them come in and guest lecture. That's how I started with my involvement in this space, in the educational space, and then grew it from there. So doing that could bring in some semblance of networking for your students, bringing in folks that are in industry. You'd be surprised how many people just answer LinkedIn. You do that. I have, for security awareness programs with companies, that's when you want the company to become more security aware, you want to build a culture of security awareness. I've just reached out to authors, so I sort of do the opposite, right? I reach out to an author of a cybersecurity book, and I say, hey, will you come in and speak to the company? You'd be surprised, most of them do. Now, sometimes you have to buy their book, but that's fine, right? Just buy their book or whatever, right?
I've got one everyone's going to cringe as soon as I say it. Esports. So if you didn't know, and there's only about, I believe, 5 or 6 in the southern region, there is an organization called the Intercollegiate Cyber Defense Competition. And it's an amazing program, and it's an esport. I joke with my wife, I'm like, because I'm not a sports person, I'm like, I want to be a coach, a college coach, and that's the sport that I'm going to go after. It's an amazing opportunity. I believe Coast, if anyone from Coast is here, I think the last couple of years they've actually hosted one of the events on their site. It's a great opportunity for students to get in front of industry. Not just like meet industry, but get in front of industry. Get into environments where they're actually learning to do things in an actual cyber range, is what we call it. And so to be able to actually do things, touch things, interact with other people, network, it's an amazing program. And again, it really ties back to that college experience that we have an opportunity to provide. So,
Thank you. So I think this is a nice segue to the next question that I want to ask, which is, can you share some examples, successful examples of partnerships between community colleges and industry that have led to meaningful student opportunities like internships, apprenticeships, or even maybe direct job placement?
So here's that question. I knew it was coming. All right, so I'll share a specific example. Over the summer, this last summer, I teach a cybersecurity boot camp once a year. Over this last summer, I met a student that was very interested in the field, had the drive. I invited him to my monthly event. At that monthly event, I introduced him to somebody that was hiring, and that person hired him on the spot, right? Those things happen. There are success stories like that happen. I was proud to do that, and we'll continue to do that, right? So,
Okay.
perfect example.
All right. David?
Yeah, I think I've seen some success in some of the mentorship programs that some universities and educational institutions are creating. Obviously industry as well, but being able to kind of have that networking opportunity to help guide students into whether it's a professional organization where they can start to build community, whether it's a boot camp or a cyber range. It's really trying to teach that skill of the interpersonal component and why it is important. A lot of great comments about it really is a differentiator in the old adage, right? It's what you know, but it's also who you know, and getting in front of people and helping them see that sense of interest and ambition, curiosity. Absolutely agree too. Like helping students look at things through a different lens. So sure, everyone wants to go straight to the top, but there's a lot of value in taking the necessary steps to build on that foundation that you're getting from community college or through other academic programs. That's really, really vital, and it's going to help reinforce those skills and expertise, and ultimately make them successful in their career and their journey, but also help that company. That said, I will caveat. I wanted to make a comment earlier, but unfortunately, a lot of times corporations, organizations are their own worst enemy, in that they don't really create a good ecosystem or pathway internally for that pipeline of students to come in. They're not necessarily doing great jobs in supporting professional development of their current employees. Upward, lateral mobility in job descriptions, I find, is lacking more than it's in place. And so, I think there's an opportunity for us to start having conversations with industry and asking them, what is your succession plan? What is your pipeline? How are you, supporting your current workforce, but then also looking at, how to continue to replenish that workforce. And a lot of times I see that still is a miss that we can really start to have conversations around, start to have partnerships around, and create a lot more improvement.
So I want to add on the student volunteers. Well, I want to concentrate the word volunteers. I have a student say, well, do you pay me for it? Well, it's volunteer, so it's an opportunity the student has to take that advantage for it. So I have a perfect example. 2 years ago, also at one of our summer camp, I have a student want to volunteer. I say I don't have money for it. I volunteer, yes. So they volunteer for entire 2 weeks, and after that, I introduced to somebody I know. Then he talked about the type of things he learned at the summer camp, how he helped other students, and the company hired him. So if a student say, I have to get paid, Well, they're not really taking the opportunity to try to help themselves. Not everything has to be paid. It's your experience you need to get. So you have to step out the comfort zone and to help yourself.
I think the other piece that has to happen too is my personal networking, and I'll talk about that piece of it. So my VP's in the back of the room, he'll know this, right? So I didn't see a pathway, so I built one. Part of what we built through our security grant was to make sure that we provided opportunities, paid opportunities for our students to actually come through, and then actually move into roles as opportunities. And when I present to them, I see the gentleman from Palo Alto in the back, I'll call you guys out, plus other industry partners that I know. I've got team, members of Microsoft, CrowdStrike, name the big companies, right? And so as I'm talking to them, it's not just about, hey, I'm potentially buying money or spending money or working with you on something. I'm like, hey, I have people coming into this space, and I would like to put them in front of you. Where's that opportunity for me? Where are your programs? Because some of them have, a lot of those big companies do have those opportunities, but again, we talked about it earlier, it's who you know, how do you get into those opportunities? And so for me, it's also to make sure that I'm networking myself to see who it is. I think I was just on call with a big vendor the other day, and I'm like, hey, by the way, since we're here, what do you do for internships? And I actually had my two lead interns who both happen to be female in the background listening, and we talked about her history, her story, how focused she was on bringing especially females into cyber. And that was an amazing opportunity because now there's that connection. So when something comes up for her, she's calling me. And so as a practitioner, as someone in the space, as someone who's trying to do this for our students, also about making sure I get out there and I make those connections to bring them back to the people that I'm trying to support.
Thank you. So if you were all there at the main stage this morning, we saw the Chancellor from my district, Lee Lambert, an AI-generated video of him talking, which was kind of fun, but also a little bit scary at the same time. So we're talking about cybersecurity here, so can you share your perspective on how AI has impacted cybersecurity, made it more something that we have to pay attention to, or has it helped combat cyber threats?
There's going to be a whole talk on this right here.
We have time.
I'll jump in really quick. So I want to make sure that we don't just talk about cyber, right? Because it really, knowing that everything feeds into cyber, right? Knowing that the help desk and computer science, those fields, AI is completely changing that whole landscape. You see all the, if you live up in the Bay Area, you know when the FANG companies have their culling. Right? So FANG, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, and Google, you know their alphabet now. You know when the culling occurs, you see those in the news, and you see that happen. And a lot of times that is, we're reducing workforce because of the efficiency of AI. And so when you see 1,000 people onto that chopping block, they're now in the workforce. Right, so in addition to all of the things that our AI is doing to improve efficiency, it's impacting our ability to get into those spaces. I talked to a bunch of computer science instructors especially who are like, oh, we don't let the students use AI. And in talking to teams at Netflix, are like, we don't not use AI. And so as we push students into those spaces, it's not just about understanding the impact of AI or that you need to have the foundational knowledge of the topic that you're studying. It's about understanding how the tools are changing on a daily basis. And that's not even from a attack and defense standpoint, that's just how this is going to impact your roles in the world. And so I think that's a big conversation that really has to be had in the classroom of how, especially in the technology space, it's not just about whether it's going to happen. It's you're walking into a space that's already impacted by this, and we need to be teaching those tools now before we get there.
Okay. Yes, I'm going to add to that and say the adversaries that are attacking companies, government, infrastructure, et cetera, are absolutely using AI. They're getting faster. The time to compromise is getting faster, and it's because of AI. However, our defenses are getting faster because of AI as well. Those are the positives. The negatives, from a talk, again from the FBI talk last week, we had the CISO of Anthropic speak there, and what he was talking about was how they no longer have SOC Tier 1 analysts. So typically, your SOC Tier 1 analyst is your entry-level position. So they no longer have SOC Tier 1 analysts because they have replaced them with AI. Now, whether or not everybody's going to do that in the next 5 years remains to be seen, but you should expect that over, let's say, the next 10 years, that position may be gone, period. So what do we do about that? What do we think about that? My thought is that we need to start thinking the next layer up for SOC analysts or security engineers in general, or just security in general. I think security engineers tend to have a very narrow scope of what it is that their job is, and it's very, this is my, technology is my job, and that's all I need to think about. What I'd like to see more are folks that are a little more well-rounded. They understand the business more, because AI right now doesn't do that. It doesn't understand that this is a business, this is a company, this is an educational institution, it's a water plant, whatever it is. It only understands the context that it's given. For now, until AI becomes smarter than we are, it understands the context that it's given. And so people need to sort of outthink AI, if you will. It's a weird thing to say. But that's what I think we need to start to teach the students. Don't think so myopically about your field. Think more business. Think more broadly.
Thank you. I'm glad you're bringing up the topic about what we should be teaching our students, because that is one of the questions that I had, is looking ahead, like let's say 5 years, what changes do you think we should, based on the changes that we might expect in the cybersecurity landscape, what should community colleges be doing to prepare our students for the future? What are some new curricular innovations that we should be working towards?
Well, technology changes rapidly all the time. We cannot keep up with it if we just teach, if as a faculty of a school. So one of the key things is how do you work with practitioners in the industry, right? The people who really in the real world is doing that. And I'm sure many of the school you guys have an advisory board, right? Have the people that actually share their real world experience and advise you what kind of a curriculum you have. And so just like I work with my colleagues, and I also encourage them to teach as well and to become adjunct faculties. So I have a number of friends now. They teach at the San Jose State, Cal State, East Bay, Ononi, right? Different schools. So by them working in our classroom and share with the real world examples, and also they can help us to create a new curriculum. And so that we can getting ahead, as we all know, right? To create a new course, it's not like today you say you want one, tomorrow is there. It takes about 6 to 9 months, right? So you have to think ahead. And so it's more of how can you create something that align with the skill set demand in the industry in the next couple of years. And by working with industry practitioners, that's how you're gonna get it.
So 6 years ago, if I would have asked you, what's the biggest data breach you remember? Some of you may say Target. You guys remember when Target got breached? That was a big deal. Now if I ask you this morning, what's the biggest data breach you remember that's happened in the last week? And you can probably think of at least 6. Right? The landscape has changed completely and dramatically. Like ever since COVID, and I talk about, when I talk specifically to IT folks in the education space, the gloves are off. Back pre-COVID, schools and hospitals, cities and counties, water, they were doing the public good, and you don't touch them. And ever since then, they come to find out we all carry insurance, and we all are really terrible at cybersecurity, so they're going to come after us in that respect, right? And so to be able to sit here and prognosticate, unfortunately, in 5 more years, what that's going to happen, I'd love to do that. I'd probably be able to make a lot of money. What we work on in our process is what's happening right now. How do we grow this process? How do we understand it? It's one of the fun things I actually do with my students is actually I require them to come in bringing current events. You guys remember doing current events in like junior high and elementary school? And so what we'll do is we'll walk through a data breach, like just based off of what did you read? Who was it? What was the threat actor? What was the way in? And that's what you're building. Is you're not building necessarily a person who can kind of come in and look at screens that go by. You're building someone who can think critically, can understand organizational risk. You're building that process of like wholly understanding what an incident is and does, and then how do we bring this tooling in to address it. So it really is, it's changing daily, and changing how we make sure we focus our students and the people that are working in the space to make sure that they're understanding every single day something's happening.
So you touched on a number of different things that I want to emphasize. One is, so I'm going to hit again on the idea of understanding business, like that needs to be done, or at least understanding the greater organization. If it's not business, if it's you're working at a water plant, like understand why you're working at a water plant, what the purpose of the water plant is, right? The other thing is risk. You touched on that. Like, thank you for that. That's always going to be true, regardless of technology, et cetera. A fundamental understanding of risk and applying risk, the greater the risk, like maybe you shouldn't do the thing, regardless of technology. I've said to a number of different executives who just don't understand cybersecurity in general, all cybersecurity is applying risk to technology. That's all it is. That's all you need to think about it. Just think about me as the chief risk officer instead of the chief information security officer, if that makes things easier for you. And the other thing you hit on was target. So as somebody who worked at Albertsons, we thought about target a lot. Here's a fun fact about target. One would have assumed, at least at the time, that when that data breach happened, that it would have imploded target, like it never exploded target, that things would have just ended target. It affected their revenue for exactly 3 months. And after those 3 months, they went right back to normal, right? But you know what didn't, or you know what affected them more was when they didn't have toilet paper on the shelves in Target Canada. That closed the stores in Target Canada. They had to end up shutting down those stores because all of their customers went over to Walmart who did have toilet paper. That's it. Supply chain for them mattered more than anything else because that's the risk for that business. It's not people's personal data, their credit card information, etc. for that particular business. It's supply chain because at the end of the day, physical good is what Target sells.
And just to kind of add to that, a lot of times I think we focus on threats and call them risks. Really the risks is the business context, right? And what resonates with the business leader and helps us get funding, helps us, make certain decisions that are going to be either risk averse or risk tolerant. So absolutely +1 to all those. The other thing I would say is, and we're slowly getting there, but changing the mental model to more of a assume breach, right? The pendulum has shifted, and the new normal is more attacks, successful exploitation, AI absolutely ramping up the ability and lowering the bar for people to be able to do that and do it at scale. And so, I think, again, we have to change how we think about things. Zero trust is a great concept to help, but there's still a lot of organizations, a lot of people that have that kind of crunchy outside, chewy inside mentality of, oh, we've got all these controls, and forget, like, what's the thing that's most important? What's that data piece, or what are the critical processes that make this business run, and then work outwards, and that'll help, really, I think, lessen some of the impacts, at least maybe hopefully the frequency of malicious events.
Somebody want to explain zero trust real quick?
Were there any questions from the audience? Go ahead, Constantine.
Yeah, this is, so let's say a community college establishes a cybersecurity lab. I'm not an expert in it, I don't know the industry, I don't know anybody, but we do care about our students, and we do have students who are really excellent in cybersecurity and they want to go forward. They don't have the experience. Internships are, I don't know many internships, but I'm not sure I know many people don't know internships. What would you recommend? I mean, I stopped by Palo Alto Networks, I talked to the gentleman in the back, he's smiling, and I said, hey, we got this Palo Alto, this research lab we are establishing. Can you come over and talk to us and see what if we can partner and maybe teach them? But is there anything in the industry or experts or what would you recommend for us to go to the next step so that we can bring these students that are very interested, but they don't know what pathways to follow? We do have a couple of instructors from Foothill College here that do teach those classes. Ron mentioned that, but it stops there. You take the class and then what? So what would you recommend to get these students in our lab as an internship, maybe with support from the industry? Which industry? Palo Alto Networks, somebody else? How would you proceed?
So my partner, 909 Cyber, also struggled with this problem and wanted to give back to the community. And so he decided he would do exactly that. And he started an effort called 909 IC. Offline, I can show you that website. And so the idea there is exactly that: start to get interns and get them connected with companies.
Awesome.
This is why I love working in community colleges. Walk over to financial aid and ask them about federal student aid workers. Right? And so one of the things I'll ask students that come to me and say, hey, I want a job. I'm like, okay, hey, first, don't answer the question. I want to understand, do you receive aid? Go to the FSA, go to the financial aid office and ask them if you're available for federal student aid, or the federal work student, excuse me. Yeah, federal work study. Yeah, that is like right there. I'll hire you right off the rip. Back when I used to run the help desk, half my kids were federal work study students because it's free. It gives opportunities for our students, and that's one of the easiest ways, right? The other piece of it too is look inward, right? And again, it's dependent upon your own programs, your own abilities within your districts, is how can we build this process within our own departments. I'm trying to help guide that conversation because again, we can create those opportunities as members of the department, as members of IT. How do we provide those opportunities? Look just outside the road. Did you ever know how understaffed and undercapable our K-12s are? We actually our internship programs goes out and says, hey K-12s, would you like free students for the summer? And that gives students the opportunity to go in, wipe Chromebooks, plug in projectors, swap things out. Yeah, it's, it may or may not be paid. Yeah, it may or may not be, super, awesome, but it's an opportunity. As he had mentioned earlier, it's an opportunity to go out, to earn some time, to show that you have a willingness to work within this space. So it's really a two-sided process, right? We internally, as the college, have to be willing to make those pathways, and then two, the students have to be able to jump on and run with us, even though sometimes it may not be paid.
Look inwards, just great advice, period.
So I want to add some more. I mentioned a little bit earlier, community college student actually has a huge disadvantage in the industry from internship. You ask a Palo Alto Network, they probably have some kind of school program, but don't put you guys down. You probably go to Stanford, go to UC Berkeley, go to those named schools. How many of you go to community college, right? It is hard. Yeah, so maybe you can find out. Maybe you can start a community college programs, won't go back, right?
I'm actually a graduate from community college.
Okay, yeah, that's even better, even better. That's even better, right?
And he comes from K-12.
Yeah. So, so it is hard. So one of the things is more of in your program, right? I think as a faculty, you need to also get involved in the industry consortium, industry organizations, because there are more companies than just Palo Alto Network, Cisco. And those are smaller companies, they do have, programs or internship or jobs that they perfectly sometimes want to hire students. And that's what I would recommend. That's where I place number of our students to those companies because, they just say, oh, we need it. Yeah, that's great, right? So that's one. Right, so I think that's a very important part of it. Other things is, I'm sure you guys have adjunct from industry, and they have a network too. Ask them, right?
Yeah, just to add to that, absolutely, it's relationship management 101, right? It's kind of what we've been saying multiple times: networking, connections, finding creative ways. At the end of the day, that's really what this career is, right? It's a lot of critical thinking, problem solving. And so, those are the types of, I think, mindsets that are going to be most successful. But, a lot of times, organizations may not have the bandwidth to sit down and really understand, hey, they know they've got a need that's not being met, but they may not have the ability to think past that, just because there's so much noise, they're firefighting constantly. So I think there's an opportunity for the education system to come to them and say, hey, we want to partner with you. We want to understand what are your needs, what are your products, where are their gaps, how can we take our current internship programs that work for other organizations or other areas in industry and apply that so that you're giving a solution to an organization. They don't have to try and sit down and figure out how are we going to build this. If you can kind of package that, and that will be really impactful for a lot of organizations and really, I think, remove some of that barrier to entry.
I think maybe we have time for one more question. Yes, go ahead.
Yes, I come from also May College, and I would like to collaborate as well, as we are opening door. We just opened our first open AI lab last week, and it's doing well. Thank you so much. I appreciate that. So by the way, I think like cybersecurity sometimes is taken for granted. I do am undergoing a tech program right now, and so I taught myself about cybersecurity, and I was so scared when I read the book about 0 Day and the Stuxnet, which is like really like a becoming like a digital weapon. And so with that risk management right now, where are we with preparing ourselves with the quantum technology? Because the risk management for that technology is really scary for now. But in that capacity, I just want to bring back to that bridging the gap, because we would like to kind of like educate ourselves like more with the risk management approach, because as an educator, sometimes like the teacher before my class forgets to sign out, and I can just easily hack the person. So I think like even the industry is like open password for some, and it's just like there's so much open doors, like anyone can enter as of now. And with this quantum technology, how can we be ready for that? If as simple as like logging out or getting a two-factor authentication is something that is not kind of like progressing sometimes.
I think you set us up for a whole new conference topic. But if you all want to answer very quickly.
Really quick, cybersecurity is not a function, it's a culture. It's a very hard move to make within the community college system, especially within education. We talk about academic freedom. We talk about all the things, and I come from this space, right? So understand that that's, I hear those words, but I talk to my cyber folks all across the state, and I say, if you walk out into the middle of the quad or wherever and ask a random faculty member who your cybersecurity person is, are they going to have an answer? And if the answer is no, that's because you haven't built the culture. You have to build that level of understanding of knowing, at my organization, they're going to be like, oh yeah, that's the guy that sends us the scary emails. So, and that's fine. I send scary emails, that's okay. But building a culture of security is more important than any framework, any process that we can put into place, because it's all about making sure that our users are empowered and that we and you understand what the risks are.
Yeah, and I'd add to that by saying that the best way to build a culture is to do it from their perspective, right? You mentioned taking over their account because they didn't log off. Okay, no, explain to them what you could have done, take over their bank account, etc. Right, and then, now I'm personally affected, right? So that helps to build a security culture.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're all plus one each other. The culture absolutely is super important. Understanding what the risk tolerance is, because not every organization or institution is going to have the same risk tolerance, right? I think one of the great things about education is it's more open. Academic is designed for us to be creative and to question and to learn and be curious. But at the same time, sometimes there may be more room to improve the security, but it's personalizing it, right? It's understanding what is that risk tolerance, what are the examples that real impacts could have. Maybe it's not necessarily to like a whole community college stakeholder pool, but perhaps maybe if there's R&D work that's being done, it's a little more sensitive, or a certain department within the the school system that's dealing with privacy, confidential personal information, right? Like those are going to be good places to start because they're probably going to have less of a risk tolerance. And then you can use them as champions, right? You build upon your successes. A lot of times I think we focus on, the doom and gloom of cybersecurity and, everything's so scary, but, there are a lot of wins too, right? It's not just about, I can't say this is the next incident, it's, hey, here's some success stories. We don't do ourselves, we often forget to beat our own drum and highlight where those wins are and leverage, other people because leading isn't just going somewhere, it's bringing people with us, right? So the more we can get that groundswell and help people work smarter, not harder, and understand what some of the trade-offs are, right? You mentioned MFA, that's always a big one, and pushback, like, oh, that's an extra step, there's friction involved. And there's some ways to do that with less friction, but it's also trying to have that conversation with them and figure out what are really their concerns and then see if you can address the root cause or find an acceptable level of risk that works, knowing that if something, when something happens, you already kind of set the stage to hopefully be able to respond faster and be able to start to shift, people always say that, but build security in earlier as a partner as opposed to someone who's kind of coming in after the fact trying to tell people that they haven't been doing what they're supposed to, and a lot of times it's to no fault.
And then I guess I'd say real quick for the quantum part of your question, it does sound scary, but the protections from quantum are not unknown to any of us, or to all of us. So it sounds scary, but I don't think right now, today, there's much to worry about. Other than don't rely on only encryption for your only protection mechanism.
62 character passwords.
All right, so for our community college educators, go ahead.
Just one more. For the corporate kind of guys, as an ex-corporate security officer, I'll ask my favorite softball question. What is the biggest cybersecurity risk a company has today?
You know the answer to that already, it's people.
What people?
All the people.
And your own people, right?
I'm going to argue on that one. As a guy in the space, I will tell you, and I tell districts this all the time, like if you can be taken down soup to nuts because they got a hold of a short-term employee's username and password, we are not doing right by our organization. So, I mean, yes, there's the risk, but at the same time, too, from a security perspective, I'm going to own that right there. And so you will never hear me tell my employees that they're the risk. They're part of the process. And that's a culture change right there, too. And I appreciate you asking that question.
Yeah, we don't tell them that.
Oh, no.
That would not be okay.
All right, to sort of wrap up our conversation. So here's what I heard for us folks in the community college space is we teach our students critical thinking skills, problem solving skills, networking, and how to build relationships. So seem like those types of themes keep coming up in many different spaces, and that is something that we need to be working on. For our industry partners, I want to say, please partner with the community colleges. That is definitely an ask from us. Maybe join our advisory boards whenever you can, or teach at our colleges. Yes, we do have part-time / adjunct teaching positions, and then most importantly, get to know our students. So you might actually find them very talented. And so with that, I want to thank our panelists and thank you all for being here.